Isolde explores the gardens to avoid Seraphine's spies and discovers a hidden greenhouse overflowing with grave roses. The greenhouse. The mist clung to everything, hedges, stone, skin. Isolde moved through it like a ghost herself, her breath barely disturbing the air as she angled away from the main path. Behind her, near the manor's eastern wing, she'd heard the low murmur of voices, Seraphine's watchers, changing posts. She'd learned their rhythm in the 3 days since arriving. The Duchess kept her people circling like carrion birds, watching the halls, the courtyard, the library where Isolde had spent her first night reading through journals that raised more questions than they answered. But the gardens sprawled in a chaos that even Seraphine's surveillance couldn't fully contain. The greenhouse appeared through the murk like something half-remembered, its glass walls sweating condensation in the cold. Most of the panes were intact, though dirt and grime made them opaque. Others had cracked into fractured spider webs. Through one break an amber glow pooled, candlelight, faint but unmistakable. Isolde approached from the side where overgrown hedges offered cover. The brass handle of a door, nearly hidden behind climbing vines, greeted her touch. It opened with barely a whisper, hinges well maintained despite the derelict appearance of everything else. The air hit her first, thick, humid, wrong. Not the clean damp of earth and growing things, but something older, something that smelled like copper and decay mixed with a sweetness that made her teeth ache. The rows of benches stretched before her in the flickering candlelight, and Isolde's breath caught. Grave roses filled every available surface, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Their blooms were impossibly dark, not black exactly, but a deep violet so saturated it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The petals curled at their edges like burnt paper, and where they'd fallen, they carpeted the stone floor in drifts that looked less like flowers and more like ash. She moved deeper into the greenhouse, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The candles in their iron sconces cast moving shadows across the ribbed stone ceiling. Above, cracks let in slivers of moonlight that looked almost artificial against the pervasive gloom. At the greenhouse's center stood an ancient tree. She couldn't identify the species. Its trunk was blackened, gnarled, its roots spreading across the floor like arthritic fingers clutching at stone. "These flowers," Isolde whispered, "they shouldn't grow here." She knelt beside the nearest bench, her fingers hovering over the soil. Not soil exactly. The earth in the pots was black. Not dark brown, not rich loam, but black as ink, almost liquid in its density. It clung to her fingertips when she touched it, warm and slightly slick. Something was feeding them. The realization settled in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. The grave roses weren't simply cultivated. They were nourished, sustained by something beyond sunlight and water. She'd read enough of the estate's journals to know what that meant. Blood. The pact Seraphine had made, generations ago, written in a language Isolde's eyes had slid over without quite comprehending. The air around her shifted. It wasn't a movement exactly, no wind, no disturbance of the heavy greenhouse air, but something changed, the way the quality of light alters when someone enters a room. Isolde straightened, her hand still resting on the bench. A figure coalesced near the far corner where the broken glass pane glowed with that phosphorescent light, spectral, translucent. A woman, or what remained of one, her edges blurred like watercolor bleeding into vellum. "The roses here hold the key to your salvation," the ghost said, her voice like wind through empty rooms, "but at a terrible price." The spectral hand rose, gesturing toward the overflowing beds. The grave roses seemed to respond to the gesture, their petals stirring though no breeze moved through the greenhouse. They drifted upward in a slow spiral, black petals catching candlelight like dark stars. Isolde's pulse quickened. She'd seen no ghost in the manor proper, had convinced herself the whispers in her dreams were simply the weight of the curse, the pressure of centuries bearing down on her. But here, surrounded by these impossible flowers, the supernatural felt less like aberration and more like fundamental truth. "I will pay any price to be free of this cursed estate," Isolde said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Free of Seraphine and her tyranny." She meant it. The words emerged from somewhere deeper than her mind, from the part of her that had understood, the moment she crossed the threshold into Nachtmar, that she would never leave unchanged. The ghost drifted closer. The temperature dropped. Isolde's breath began to mist. "The roses bloom with the blood of the damned," the ghost said. "Their scent is a siren's call to those who seek power, those who would bargain for it." The air shimmered around the spectral figure as she spoke, an unnatural warmth that seemed to push against the cold. Isolde felt caught between two temperatures, between two states of being, the ghost's eyes, colorless, empty, fixed on hers. This close, the ghost's form became clear to her, a woman in what might have been a scholar's robe, her features worn smooth by time or sorrow or both. She recognized the familiar curve of the face, the tilt of the shoulders. "Then let me drink deep of their power," Isolde said. "I have nothing left to lose." She reached toward the nearest grave rose, her fingers extended. The petals were soft, almost warm to the touch. As her skin made contact, the rose seemed to yield, to lean into her palm like a living thing seeking comfort. She plucked it. The petals came away easily, and where the bloom had been, dark liquid wept from the stem. Not quite blood, too thick, too dark, but something close enough to make Isolde's stomach clench. The nectar dripped onto her palm, warm and slightly viscous. It smelled of earth and copper and something floral that made her head swim. "Beware, child of the night," the ghost said, her voice fading as she retreated into the shadows. "The path you choose is one of eternal darkness." The spectral figure dissolved like morning mist, leaving Isolde alone in the greenhouse with the roses and the ancient tree and the weight of choice settling into her bones. She looked down at the grave rose in her trembling hand, at the dark liquid staining her palm, at the thousands of blooms surrounding her in the flickering candlelight, each one a door opening onto something she couldn't yet name. The greenhouse held its breath around her. Somewhere in the manor, Seraphine's watchers continued their endless circling, unaware that Isolde had stepped beyond their reach or deeper into it. She wasn't sure which anymore.